Okay, good morning to the recording. We're going to begin in a moment. I want to share my screen so we get the window, all the different texts on. Right. Just want to no, I know which one it was. 1 second. Yeah, there we go. I think it was this one. I think the last one we looked at last week was the end of this text. Yeah, no, sorry. Yeah, here it was. By the good morning, I see Charlie's there. Morning,
Hey,
Charlie.
Charlie.
Good morning, Rini. And last week we finished talking about some of the ethical issues when we're talking about sexual harassment in synagogue and Jewish professionals. We had the case, of course, of Shlomo Carlebach, which was a very sad event. And we looked at some texts that talked about what we should do about it. And then we took, we looked at it's time to stop making excuses. And then we looked also at a response by Shlomo Carlebach's daughter, Neshama. And I think we had some different opinions as to whether or not people felt comfortable listening to his music and or even attending services where his music was featured prominently. So today I want to go on and let me go to a different one of our sources. Good morning, Sima. And we're
Good
going to,
morning.
okay, here we go. Okay. We're going to look at this source. Now, the name of this source is Do the Rabbis Support a Victim Blaming? And that's also a very important issue in the issue of sexual harassment. Who's to blame? When someone is harassed, is the victim blamed? Does the perpetrator say things about the victim that are inappropriate, which we see happen today in many cases, and we'll look at a couple of biblical examples where we see some questions as to who's to blame and what happened exactly. Now, the text we're looking at is this Rabbi Lauren Berman, who's a graduate of the Yeshiva Chovevei Torah, that is that more liberal Orthodox yeshiva that also trains women. And you can see he's done quite a bit, some interesting things. I'm not sure this is relevant, but he does do kickboxing and is interested in various issues. So what we're going to look at today, the story in the Bible of Dinah, which is a classic example of how the Bible presents this issue of sexual harassment, even of rape. And what we have here, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. He did bring the entire story from the book of Genesis in the Hebrew, and then here it is in the English. I want to take a look at a couple of the verses closely, and then we'll take a closer look at it. It actually begins very pointedly. Now, Dinah, the daughter whom Leah had borne to Jacob. Now, remember, when the rabbis read the biblical text, they look at the text very carefully and always ask questions such as, well, why is this word here? Why is this phrase here? Why is this phrase before this phrase? Why is this phrase after phrase? They're looking at a very tightly constructed text and trying to understand precisely what the text is teaching us through this very close reading. So, for example, as we'll see, we note that now Dinah, the daughter whom Leah had borne to Jacob. Don't we know that? That's not new information, right? So one of the questions we're going to have is, so why is the Bible telling us that? And she went out to visit the daughters of the land. And again, the rabbis are going to ask, what does that mean exactly? Why did she do that? All it says is that she went out to visit the daughters of the land. Was there a reason for that? Was that an appropriate thing to do? Was that an inappropriate thing to do? The text itself is fairly neutral on this, right? It doesn't seem to imply necessarily that there is either that this is an inappropriate action, an appropriate action, or is it just a neutral action? But it's there, and what does that mean? So the rabbis are going to look at that. Okay. And the next verse, Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, chief of the country, saw her, took her, and lay with her by force. Again, we're going to see that the Hebrew, we're going to take, I'll just go back to the Hebrew for a second. Okay. Vayishkav ita v'ye'anenha. Okay, the Hebrew. Now, if I was going to translate this word by word, literally, not idiomatically, I would say he took her, he slept with her, and he forced her. Okay, those are the words, those are the verbs. And notice, and the rabbis are going to be very careful about, well, what about the sequence of those verbs? Why does it say in this way? He took her, he slept with her, and he forced her, or, right, or overpowered her, or raped her. So why are those words in that sequence? Okay. And then the story. Some other salient points. When Jacob hears about it, Jacob kept silent until his sons came home. Also a question, what do you mean he came silent? Until the sons came home. We know that they were distressed, and Hamor, the chief, said, my son would want to longs for your daughter and to marry with us. And so what happens, as you may recall, Jacob's son said, speaking with guile because he had defiled their sister, we cannot do this thing to give us to a man who is uncircumcised. That is disgrace. So if you circumcise yourselves, everything will be okay. Okay. So what do? It says that they convince all the residents of the land to circumcise themselves, and all those men out of the gate of his town were circumcised. So they circumcised themselves, and 3 days later, Shimon and Levi, two of Jacob's sons, these are the full siblings to Dinah, right? Took each a sword, came upon the city unmolested, and slew all the males. Killed everybody. Okay. And then they took their sister back. Jacob said to Levi, you have brought trouble to me, making me odious among the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and my men are few in number, so that if they unite against us and attack me, I and my house will be destroyed. But they answered, should our sister be treated like a whore? And again, Jacob is silent. Okay, so just a review of the story, and this really asks various questions. And sorry, last name of the rabbi, it's Rabbi Berman. Rabbi Berman here asks some questions which we should ask ourselves, such as what are some of the Me Too moments and the issues in the text? So what are some of the issues here?
Well, there was deceit on the part of the brothers.
Deceit on the part of the brothers. Okay. What other issues might there be?
Dinah went out into the land. She took some chances going out of the confines of the Jewish settlement. She went outside without any protection, so to speak, male protection. She
Okay,
put
so
herself
well,
she put herself in a predicament.
Yes, we're going to be talking about that question. Did she go out? What is this about this going out? Okay. Any other questions, Gary? You're muted. We can't hear you. You're still Gary. You're muted. You got to unmute your computer. Whoops! I think we lost you. Okay, we'll wait for Gary to come back, but he'll be back. What other questions does this raise?
Well, Jacob was silent also.
Jacob was silent. What is what? Here's the situation where someone is victimized, right? His own daughter,
He was the father.
and he doesn't say anything. A lot of revenge was taken, right? Okay. Yeah. Who are the main actors? Who are the main actors?
Well, Diener, the
Well, let's
brothers,
stop.
and
Charlie,
Shechem.
let me stop. What we see Dina go out, right? Right? It says she goes out, but we don't hear from her again, right? What does Dina actually say in the story?
Nothing.
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 Carol, you say? Yeah.
She says nothing.
She says nothing, right? In this biblical story, the woman is silent, right? Shouldn't you question as to, well, why don't we hear her voice? Okay. Yeah, Rini?
Isn't that typical of the time? I mean,
Okay, very
they were
typical.
kind of property in a way, if he felt he could just take her and then decide to marry her.
Right. Was she asked permission?
No.
Hey, you want to marry this guy? Or was she taken into the plot? Hey, Dina, we got this plot. This is what we're gonna do. No, did she even know? So yeah, doesn't have very much to do or to say. And this other question, why did Dina go out? Well, why did she go out?
Rabbi,
Yeah.
first
So-
of all, she had to have spoken to tell them what happened, which a lot of women don't.
Okay.
So she had to have spoken. I don't know, but she wasn't given the option of what she wanted done to her assaulter.
Okay. Okay. They didn't say to her, okay, Dina, what should we do? What's your best opinion? Yeah. Good point.
But she did talk. She had to have told someone that it happened. So versus a lot of women don't. And that's what the whole Me Too movement is all about. That no one actually says anything most of the time.
Okay. There's that. We'll take a look at that in a little detail in some of this. Yes.
Or it could be that she was just silent. She chose to be silent.
Well, why did she choose to be silent?
Was she intimidated?
Was she intimidated? Did she feel that
Maybe
no
she
matter?
was conflicted. He did propose to her after the rape. Maybe she was conflicted. Maybe she wasn't listened to. Maybe they didn't care about her. It was
Right.
just about them. It wasn't her. It was their honor was tinged that they didn't care about her so much.
Right. And even if you did say something, it's not recorded in our text.
True.
Right. Gary, is that you again with your hand up?
Yeah, well, the question is, and you led right into it, why is it not recorded in the text?
Of what right. The dean is saying or feelings. Okay. And why were all the men slaughtered? Why did they go in and kill everybody? Why not just kill Shechem or maybe Shechem and Hamor? His father, the chief. Yeah, Rini?
Well, maybe they wanted to make sure it didn't happen to any other of their women. They didn't want it to look like, this wasn't serious.
You have prevented murder of all the other people to prevent a possibility. That's not justice.
Well,
Okay.
but
Carol,
we're talking about different times. This is,
What? No,
maybe people reacted that way.
killing people is forever. It's not different times. This was a situation where they chose to kill everybody. Instead of just killing the perpetrators, they killed everyone in sight.
Maybe
That's called genocide.
Charlie, maybe justice has evolved. Maybe at one time it was get rid of everyone, but it became more nuanced.
Okay.
Time rolled on.
Carol, you would wanting to say something?
I was going to say that Dina says nothing because she feels guilty and she is made to feel guilty. She says nothing during the episode of the rape, rape. And I think she's made to feel guilty for having gone out alone without escort. And she says nothing during the episode of assault.
Okay, so the victim is blaming herself.
She's blaming herself,
Right.
and she's blamed, I think, by her family.
Right. Also, by the way, this question is about killing everybody. Maybe they did the wrong thing. The Bible is reporting what they did. Now it's true. Jacob does not say anything at this point. But if we go to the end of the book of Genesis, when Jacob is blessing his children, he does say that Shimon and Levi are hotheads, right? So maybe the Bible is reporting what happened. Maybe where he's supposed to say, this doesn't look good. This doesn't look right.
Well, he's saying you caused me a lot of trouble. He didn't really say you did the wrong thing. He just said, look, all the trouble you got us.
Yeah, you got us. That's correct. At this point, he says you got us in a lot of trouble. Right, right.
Isn't that one and the same? If you cause me trouble in my eyes, you've done wrong.
Well, he didn't say you did wrong. That's the problem.
Right. He says that we're in trouble, and later on he says you're just a bunch of hotheads, right? Again, if you look at the blessing of Jacob at the end of the book of Genesis. Yeah, Rini?
Aren't there other instances in the Torah where even God tells the people to plunder a city? Or I know there's a I don't remember which instance, but they were told to plunder the whole city, but they saved the cattle.
Yeah, the Midianites.
So,
well, Rini, okay, Rena, and then we'll get Carol. Okay.
No, so I don't think that it may not be something that is admirable, but I don't think it was unique to take that kind of revenge, unless this was, I don't know the timing. I don't remember. I don't know the chronology of when God told them to plunder a city, or they just.
That's much later. That's much later.
Sorry, a lot.
What? Okay, Carol. Yeah.
I think that's part of the story of Amalek, isn't
Well,
it?
the story during the time that the Israelites are traveling from Egypt to the land of Israel, they do encounter a number of enemies, and God does occasionally tell them to wipe them out. Yes.
Right.
By the way, God didn't tell Shimon and Levi to wipe them out in this case.
No. I'll go along with that, but I mean, I don't think it's something that wasn't done in those times. That that we're so shocked about it, but I'm not so sure it was such an unusual occurrence.
Okay.
That's all. I don't know that much.
Okay.
So
now Rabbi Berman asked another fascinating question. What would the world look like if women knew men would stand up for them like Shimon and Levi did? I'm not sure what question he's asking. I can see two parts of that question. Part one is that what would the world look different if women knew that men stood up for them? Or what would the world look like if women knew that when men stood up for them, they went out and mercilessly slaughtered anyone who had done them wrong? I feel like there's two questions there. You know what I mean? And I think he's kind of on both sides of that. So the question one would be, what would the world look like if women knew men would stand up for them, versus what would the world look like if women knew that men would just go around and kill anybody who had done them wrong? Any comment on that? Either way.
Well, the other brothers didn't participate. So, I mean, only 2 of the 10 brothers were.
Well, those are the full siblings. Those are the full siblings, right? The rest of them were half brothers.
But 3 of the half brothers did not. The 3 of the full brothers did not participate.
Yeah.
Judah did not participate. Reuben did not participate.
Right. But
So
two of the full brothers did, and all of the half brothers did not. some of the full brothers did and some did not. So is it a question again, as we go back to the book of Genesis, these guys are just hotheads, and maybe it wasn't such a good idea.
Could they have been representatives of the other brothers, willing to
Unclear.
do their dirty work?
Well, it does. If we look at the text, let's go back down to the text. It just says that just Shimon and Levi. Yeah. Then after that, right after Shimon and Levi kill everybody, the rest of the brothers join in. They came upon the slain and plundered the town.
That was the easy part.
Exactly. Oh, they're dead. Let's go get their stuff. Yeah. Okay, let's take a look at some of the text. Let's go. He's asked some questions. Let's see what some of the traditional ways. We're going to look at both traditional and what is interesting in many of these stories is that we do now have some modern feminist scholars who are looking at these stories and trying to, and interpreting the text in slightly different ways. Okay, so here's from Yalkut. These are just different rabbinic midrash. Okay, Yalkut Shimoni. When one has a pound of meat and he exposes it, that is when the birds snatch it from you. In this way did Dinah, the daughter of Leah, go out, and Shechem saw her. Okay. This is obviously a midrash written by a male. What do we think about this?
Me Too movement would slaughter him.
Yes. Well, what is this? What is this midrash doing?
It's blaming Dinah.
Exactly.
Which is the whole problem with the Me Too movement. The woman's always blamed, which is not the case, should not be the case.
Right. How, are they saying Dinah are like meat? In fact, in other words, meat, I would say, in other words, what a temptation. How can you expect a bird not to fly after some food that is available? And how can you not expect males to be attracted to and then do as Shechem did? In other words, this is a really blame the victim midrash, is it not? About not are we surprised? No. Was it typical of the time? Yes. Is it the only way to understand it? Well, we'll look at some other ones. Again, you'll note how these midrashim are written and what they say about Dinah. Rabbeinu Bachia, okay. The reason the Torah describes why is she called Dinah, the daughter of Leah? Come on, you know that. Ooh, we all know that Dinah's mother was Leah, so why does the Torah have to tell us this at this point? When we all know that she was Leah's daughter, because she was trying to attract attention to herself. She had bedecked herself. It's even worse now. Not only did she go out, but she was wearing attractive clothing to make herself attractive. She proved to be a true daughter of her mother, who had also attracted attention to herself by leaving her tent, as we have been told in Genesis 30:16. Now, here's a question as to whether, he's trying to say, why do they say that she's the daughter of Leah? So he brings a verse. When Jacob came home from the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "You are to sleep with me, for I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." Without going into the whole story, it's a little complicated. Bottom line is, there was a case in the Bible earlier on when Leah, who felt neglected, went out to see her husband and went out to him, and she was basically saying to him, "Come on, tonight you're going to sleep with me." Therefore, when Dinah went out, it's like when her mother did. Very suggestive. Scripture is critical of women who leave the security and modest environment of their homes unnecessarily. This is almost sounding really disturbing. Solomon wrote in Proverbs, "She is loud and rebellious, her feet would not stay at home. Now outside, now in the street, she lurks in every corner." In other words, this is something women shouldn't do. David had written about a woman who stays at home, talking the Psalms. The true measure of a princess is found in the fact that she remains indoors. It's sounding like the Taliban, right? When the angels asked Abraham where Sarah was, he answered, "Here she is in the tent." And the rabbis are assuming, that was not just a factual statement, but that was a positive characteristic of Sarah, that she stayed in the tent. So I think it's very clear about blaming the victim. Okay.
But Rabbi, the
Yes.
text omits the fact that Leah had traded that privilege with Rachel.
Yes. But the
I
point,
mean, that's part of the story. In other words, she's going to sleep with Jacob because she prearranged that with Rachel and made a trade to do that.
right, she made a trade to do that, but hey, she didn't have to make the trade.
But it didn't say it in the story. My point is that that part is omitted from the story, like the story omitted maybe part of what Dina had to say.
Well, no, I will tell you that generally you're right. When the Midrash or the Talmud quotes from the Bible, they frequently will quote one verse and not the whole context. You're
I
right,
see.
Charlie.
Okay.
Okay, that is a common thing. So yes, you're right. Leah did make a trade. Mandrakes for sleeping with Jacob, right?
Yes.
And while that was, reported in the biblical text, what this commentary is saying, when she made that trade, she then, quote, went out. And going out towards someone, they're saying, means that you were making yourself sexually available. Now, you're right, in the Bible, it's a bit different, but they're just making the parallel. Okay.
Okay.
All right. The next one, even if you say that she stayed in the tent, it's a little complicated. And it is written, and went into his house and leaned his hand on the wall, and a snake bit him. That's from the book of Amos, one of the prophets. And when Jacob arrived to his property in Eretz Canaan, the snake bit him. They're trying to say that, staying in the tent is good. Don't go outside. What did Shechem do? He brought female drummers outside of her tent, and when they drummed, Dinah went to see the daughters of the land. It was at this moment that Shechem stole her, and he slept with her. In other words, perhaps we're trying to make it a little more that Dinah went out just because she wanted to go out, or did Shechem kind of plan something to make her go out? It may seem a little less of a blame Dinah interpretation. Okay, but here's a point that is worth going over in some detail. You'll notice again in the Hebrew, he took her, he slept with her, and he forced her. Okay, those verbs are used consecutively. So now the question is going to be asked. Here it is. He slept with her and abused her or forced her. According to Rashi, the word he slept with her describes normal intercourse, whereas the word abused her describes a more perverted method of sexual intercourse. In other words, they're trying to say, well, the sequence of words seem to indicate that they had sex and it was mutually agreeable, and after that, they had sex again, and that was the rape. Okay, we'll see how this. All right. And Abraham, Ibn Ezra, understands he abused her as describing the pain involved in her having intercourse as she had been a virgin. So now they're debating, do these words and the sequence of the words indicate anything? And Nachmanides writes that there's no need for all these explanations, seeing that any intercourse in which the woman is being raped is described in the Bible as abuse suppression. In other words, of those three verbs, took, slept, and abused, anytime you use the word abused, that means rape. In this instance, intercourse by mutual consent appears to have preceded the rape. Now they're saying the sequence of the verbs are indicative of what happened. Okay. They're saying that she at first agreed and it was mutually acceptable, and after that, he raped her. Okay. Interesting. The opposite was the case in the rape of Tamar by her half brother Amnon. Oh, Tamar, you're here. Okay. All right. By the way, there are two Tamars in the Bible. You know, at least actually there are three, but we're talking about the second one. Okay. This is a little complicated. We're not talking about the Tamar in the story of Judah and Joseph. We're talking about the Tamar in the story of King David. And that story, again, is briefly noted here. There, the rape is mentioned before the sexual intercourse. Some commentators suggest that Dinah had first been seduced, i.e., willingly, and whereas Amnon never bothered to seduce Tamar. Now, I'm going to take a little break from this biblical story and go to that story of Tamar and Amnon, which is, again, another example. And I brought some of the biblical verses. This is Amnon. These are the children of King David. Okay. And Amnon has this desire to sleep with his sister. He caught hold of her and said, "Come lie with me, sister." But she said to him, this is Tamar talking to Amnon in the book of 2 Samuel. Don't, brother, don't force me. Such things are not done in Israel. Don't do such a vile thing. What's interesting already in this text?
He's refusing him.
She is refusing. We hear her voice at this point, right? Okay. Where will I carry my shame? And you will be like any of the scoundrels in Israel. But then something odd. Please speak to the king. He will not refuse me to you. Not quite sure what's going on there, but we are hearing her voice of protest, right? And then what happens? But he would not listen to her. V'lo aval lishmoa b'kola. He grabbed her. V'yaneha v'yishchav ita. So notice the sequence of verbs in this biblical verse is the opposite of the sequence of verbs we have with Dinah. With Dinah, it's he slept with her and then he forced her. In this case, he forced her and he slept with her, right? He overpowered her and lay with her. Okay. That's an interesting question. So in the case of Tamar, did I bring the rest of the? No, okay. In the case of Tamar, it's interesting. We have an example in the Bible where it's two things are different. One, the woman protests, and the rabbis is trying to understand, or at least trying to make a distinction by the sequence of verbs to suggest that in the case of Dinah, unlike the case of Tamar, right? In the case of Dinah, did she agree to have sex and then he raped her? In the case of Tamar, did he rape her and then, they had sex? They try to understand why these verbs are used in this case. By the way, does it make a difference?
Well, he was also a sibling. Yeah, he was a half brother.
So we're talking about incest here.
Yes, I mean, whereas Shechem was just a stranger.
Right. Does it make the rape any difference to say that they had, again, did she agree? Again, do we have these discussions? Oh, she said it was okay, right? Does the male say, oh, she said it was okay, so how can she protest afterwards? Follow what I'm saying? So we sometimes hear that, right? The defense is, well, we had sex and she was good with that. So we had sex again. And, what's the problem? as opposed to saying that the second time was forcible and rape. So there's some disagreement on that. Oh, by the way, what do you, how do we understand it? How do we understand what happened to Dina? Do you think that the text that we have is it very clear? And those who were trying to say, he slept with her and then he forced her, as opposed to the other way around, does it make a difference? Yeah, Rainey?
I can't wrap my head around her going out, to see the town or something like that. And some guy comes over and says, "Boy, you're really attractive. Will you sleep with me?" Given her background and the home she's from, it just doesn't make sense. I know the verbs, the rabbis always analyze the order of the verbs, but somehow it doesn't make sense that she would have sex with him and then he would rape her a second time. The whole thing doesn't make sense to me.
So who's to blame?
Well, Shechem is to blame.
Okay.
I mean, we can't keep blaming the victim just because someone is pretty. She's not, everyone who's married thinks their wife is pretty. Men might not think other wives are pretty, but whoever is married to someone thinks that person is pretty. And that doesn't give them a right to, so as you said, in the Taliban, they make women wear, cover up everything. But that's, you can't blame the victim.
Right, but it also comes to the question, once a woman agrees to have sexual relations with a man, and then they have sexual relations again, the man's defense is, well, she agreed to do it, right? Once, so why is she complaining now, right?
But there have been cases where husbands have been accused of rape because their wife didn't want to have sex and they forced her. So that's rape, even though they're married.
But up until not so long ago, it was not rape, right? We understand.
Well, that's true.
Right? The laws are reflective of once you've agreed to have sexual relations and you're married, then rape never applies, right? That's the defense. And that's the saying, if we look at the sequence of verses, if we say they agreed, this is going back to that idea. If she agreed to have sex with him first, then she has no basis for claiming rape. That's the question.
Well, but we don't know that she did except by the order of the verbs in the story.
Right. That question is right. Well, we're going to see some modern feminists looking at that in a few moments. Okay. All right. So there's another text that's brought here. There's that obligation to allow oneself to be killed rather than engage in forbidden sexual intercourse. Remember, we said there are 3 sins that you should die rather than commit. You should not commit a sexual sin, you should not commit murder, and you should not commit idolatry. If somebody says to do that, you should die, as opposed to if someone says to you, I want you to violate Shabbat, then you don't have to give up your life or eat a piece of non-kosher meat. So how does shouldn't Dina, if she was have allowed herself to be killed rather than submit to this? Right. So the rabbis are trying to take a much later rabbinic teaching and say, does that apply to Dina in this situation? And then they bring that question. We looked at this before, remember? The incident involving a certain man who set his eyes upon a certain woman to the point he became deathly ill. He looks at this woman and it says, like, if I can't be with her, I'm going to die. And this is not a poetic song or a, hyperbole. Literally, I'm going to die. And they came and asked doctors what was to be done. The doctor said he will have no cure until she engages in sexual intercourse with him. I mean, this is okay. Admittedly, far-fetched, but here's what they're saying. I'm going to die unless I have sex with her, and should the doctors allow me to live? Isn't life such a great importance? The sages said, let him die. She may not engage in sexual intercourse with him. Okay, understood. That makes clear. The doctor said she should at least stand naked before him. That would be okay. We've had this text before. The sages said, let him die. She may not stand naked before him. The doctor suggested the woman should at least have, have a converse with him behind a fence in a secluded area so that he could derive a small amount of pleasure from the encounter. The sages said, let him die. She may not converse with him behind a fence. The Gemara continues, Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi and Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani disagree. One of them says the woman in question was a married woman, and the other one says she was unmarried. Should this make a difference? You would think, many of us would say, what difference does it make? Granted, in the one who says that she was a married woman, the matter is properly understood, right? Adultery is very serious. Since the case involved a severely prohibited forbidden relationships, the sages did not allow any activity hitting at intimacy. But according to the one who says that she was unmarried, what is the reason for all this opposition? The rabbis are even entertaining the idea that maybe because she was unmarried, it wasn't so bad. And of course, that does sound a little disturbing to us, to say the least. Why did the sages say the man must be allowed to die rather than have the woman do as was requested? Rav Papa says this is due to the potential family flaw, i.e., harm to the family name, as it is not permitted to bring disgrace to the entire family in order to save the lovesick man. I find that disturbing. She's an unmarried woman, so the sexual relationships are not prohibited, but one of the rabbis says, well, it would bring disgrace to the family. Again, it's not seeing this through the perspective of the woman, right? It's about the family. Rav Acha, son of Rav Ika, says, this is so that the daughters of Israel should not be promiscuous with regard to forbidden sexual relations. Were they to listen to the doctor's recommendations, Jewish women might lose moral restraint. What does that say? Well, it seems to me it says that there's an implication here that women are not able to self-discipline, right? This looks, they're so weak, they'll just give in, right? So unfortunately, we do see in some of these traditional commentaries some what I would say are disturbing, situations. Okay, actually, the next text is not that important. All right, I want to go to the next one. Number 8. Let me see, what's that? 7. Oh, sorry. Did I? Oh, here it is. Okay. Let's go to the top. And let's talk about Esther and Vashti. Who's the hero of the story, Esther or Vashti?
Vashti.
Who?
Vashti.
Why do you say Vashti is the heroine?
She refused to go to the king. She knew there would be consequences. She refused.
Okay.
Whereas Esther went to the king to get something accomplished.
Well, she saved the Jewish people, didn't she?
Right.
She did, right. But she went to the king. She violated the norm that you don't go to the king.
Oh, okay.
But in extraordinary circumstances, one would violate the norm. I think you have to look at the circumstances.
Okay, by the way, what happened to Vashti? What was Vashti's fate?
She died.
Got rid of her.
Well, it's, she...
He killed her.
Well, we're going to take a look at the text and see. We'll see. We'll see in the text. Okay, let's take a look at the text first. Okay, we'll see what happens to Vashti and how we understand that question as to women's role in being harassed. Okay, so we know what happened. You know the beginning of the story, the first chapter of the book of Esther, and everyone's getting drunk. And every it's all right. They're drinking for days and days. In addition, Queen Vashti gave a banquet for women in the royal palace of King Ahasuerus on the seventh day when the king was merry with wine, to bring Queen Vashti before the king wearing a royal diadem. Now, you know how the rabbis interpret this, right? They say only a royal diadem as opposed to wearing a royal diadem. To display her beauty to the peoples, she was a beautiful woman, but the queen refused to come to the king's command conveyed by the eunuchs. The king was greatly incensed, and his fury burned within him. The king consulted the sages, and they say, what shall be done to him? Queen Vashti has committed an offense not only against your majesty, but also against all officials and against all the peoples in the province of King Ahasuerus. Here is a woman refusing a man's request, and therefore her offense is not just against the king, it's against every male. Okay. For the queen's behavior will make all wives despise their husbands, as they reflect that King Ahasuerus himself ordered Queen Vashti to be brought before him, and she would not come. And there'll be no end of scorn and provocation. Let it be written so that it cannot be abrogated. By the way, it's nothing. By the way, talking about how weird how this is a fictional story. You know, they're making law. This occurs again in the book of Esther. They make laws, and the laws cannot be changed. You can't even have a constitutional convention, right? In other words, there are several times within the book of Esther, which again makes many of the commentators say, this is a satire. This is not to be taken seriously. Okay. You made it be written so it cannot be changed that Vashti shall never enter the presence of King Ahasuerus. And it was approved. Okay, so it's not clear what, in other words, was she just banished or was she actually killed? It seems that she was more likely she was banished. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at how some of the rabbis of the traditional interpretations and some modern interpretations, how do we see Vashti? Okay, this is from the Talmud. Also, Vashti the queen made a feast for the women in the royal house, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. The Gemara questions why she held the feast in the royal house, a place of men, rather than in the women's house, where it should have been. Rava said in response, the two of them had sinful intentions. Ahasuerus wished to fornicate with the women, and Vashti wished to fornicate with the men. This explains the folk saying that people say, he with pumpkins and his wife with zucchinis. It's kind of a really weird statement. I had to look that one up. Indicating that often a man and his wife engage in similar actions. What is this commentary saying to this point? What is the commentary saying to this point?
He's kind of distorting the whole situation. He's trying to justify what Ahasuerus did.
Yeah, he's trying. How does he justify what Ahasuerus did? By saying
that Vashti did something bad.
Vashti's just as bad.
Right.
Why should we blame King Ahasuerus for some of the crazy things he did when Queen Vashti was just as bad? Now, the text of the book of Esther just says she had a party, right? She made a feast for the women in the royal house. That's all it says. But the interpretation, again, yes, we having a male interpretation. Again, are we looking at blaming the victim? She's just as bad. He with pumpkins and his wife with zucchinis. Aren't they both squashes, I believe? Yes. Any experts on vegetation here?
Well, there's another story that he was from the lower classes. He was not a royalty, whereas she was the real royalty. Vashti was the real queen as far as her lineage was concerned, but Ahasuerus was sort of a stable boy who just kind of wandered into being a royal royalty. He just sort of was a
Well,
layman who became a royal.
well, let's put it this way. He certainly, in later parts of the Book of Esther, does not show a great deal of intelligence. Can we agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah, he does some really stupid things. And he's manipulated. He's manipulated by his advisors, right? Haman manipulates him very well. But this is, as I think Tammy correctly says, this is a way of trying to blame Vashti. You know, this he with pumpkins and his wife with zucchinis, indicating that often a man and his wife engage in similar actions. Okay, both the queen and the king were looking to have sex with other people, right? And we shouldn't read it, and as opposed to just the king is the one who's drunk and who is the promiscuous one, right? So that's what it's trying to say. Okay.
Isn't it also trying to say that the queen may have wanted to respond to what she saw as horrendous behavior on the part of the king, her way of getting even?
A way of getting even, okay, giving her more ability to act.
Right.
You're gonna have a crazy party? Guess what? I'm gonna have a crazy party. You're not the only one gonna have crazy, wild parties. I'll have my own wild party. Okay. Okay. On the seventh day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, this goes into some other areas. Is it that to say that until now the heart was not merry with wine? Did it take him 7 days to get drunk? Rava said the seventh day was Shabbat, when the difference between the Jewish people and the Gentiles. Okay, this is going in a little different direction. Let's move down. The Median women are the most beautiful, while others said the Persian women are the most beautiful. Achashverosh said, the vessel that I use, i.e. my wife, is neither Median nor Persian, but rather Chaldean. Did he wish to see her? They said to him, yes, provided that she is naked, which, by the way, is not in the text, right? It's again adding to that. For we wish to see her without any additional ornaments. She's wearing a gold diadem, and they're interpreting that that's the only thing that she was wearing. Vashti was punished in this humiliating way, for it is the measure that a man measures to others that he himself is measured. In other words, God punishes individuals in line with their transgression. This teaches that the wicked Vashti, now Vashti has become wicked, right? Did we know that she was wicked before? Would take the daughters of Israel and strip them naked and make them work on Shabbat. Therefore it was decreed that she should be brought before the king naked on Shabbat. What's happening to Vashti here?
They're ripping her to pieces.
Yeah, they're blaming her. And these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti, what she had done, and what was decreed against her. That is to say, just as she had done with the young Jewish women. Again, what is it that she had done? Text in the book of Esther is not saying that at all. It doesn't say what it was, but the rabbis are interpreting it here, that she had done things to Jewish women. But the queen refused to come. The Gemara asks, since she was immodest, as the master said above, the two of them had sinful intentions, Vashti and Achashverosh. What is the reason that she did not come? This teaches that she broke out in leprosy, and therefore she was embarrassed to expose herself publicly. An alternative reason for her embarrassment was taught in another part of the Talmud. The angel Gabriel came and fashioned her a tail. In other words, the reason she didn't want to come was because she was being punished for being evil by having something disfigure her body.
Rabbi,
What?
where did they get all this from? I mean, the Megillah doesn't have anything like this. It just said she didn't come. Oh, who?
It's midrash. The rabbis do this all the time. Where did Abraham break the idols of his father Terach? Not in the Bible. Right? That's
There
all
is a
midrash.
Rabbi, there's a tractate in the Talmud called Esther.
Megillah.
Megillah, yeah.
Okay.
So it's a whole tractate. They have a whole.
Right. In other words, the rabbis do this all the time. They interpret. They expand upon what they see. But notice what's the assumption here about Vashti?
That she's the problem.
She
she's
got
the
what she got
cause.
what she deserved.
Right.
Right? If you think Ahasuerus is a crazy, guy, gets crazy parties with drunkenness and all sorts of things, Vashti does the same thing. And she
Mhm.
gets
But-
punished.
These times were written when men dominated women. The women and wives were chattel. And all these commentaries are reflecting that these are just male comments that are
Right.
berating women, and it's disgusting and terrible. All of them,
Well, they get the
starting with
attitude towards
Tamar and
women.
all of them.
We're
Yeah,
seeing attitudes expressed towards women, which we can see as a reflective in some of the social issues that have come up with the Me Too movement.
right.
Now, this is another commentary. This is a modern commentary. Vashti refused to appear, and now she may never appear again. While the book is silent about what became of Vashti, right? It would seem that she was just exiled, maybe, I don't know. Many midrashim interpret her punishment as execution. Again, not in the text.
Right.
Yeah.
Why are we to assume she was banished?
Well, the text seems to indicate she was banished, but the rabbis go further and say she was executed, which again makes her misbehavior even more serious, right? So
They
yeah,
were a bunch of dominating men too, who only looked through their point of view, and they were influenced by the culture of the day.
yes, and the way people looked at women. Okay, so that's Vashti. I don't know if we have time. Well, maybe just a few moments to talk a little bit about Esther. And again, when you say, where did the rabbis come up with these things? Well, what about Esther? By the way, how is Esther related to Mordecai?
His niece.
Not really his niece.
His wife. In the Talmud, it suggests
Okay,
she's his wife.
right. That we'll see that we're going to look at this. The Talmud suggests that Esther was Mordecai's wife, which is not explicit in the Bible. Which also, by the way, doesn't that set up a whole different dynamic in this?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course.
Okay. He Esther bat do. But in other words, Esther is the daughter of an uncle, like a niece, for she did not have a father or a mother, and she was beautiful and beautiful to look at. And when her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as Levat. Now, if you literally translate Levat, that would mean he took her as if she was his daughter, like an adoption, right? She was his niece, but he treated her like a daughter. Okay. Okay, it's here. His foster father, he was the foster father to Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father or mother. The maiden was shapely and beautiful, however they're translating it. And when her father and mother died, Mordecai adopted her as his own daughter. Okay. But the rabbis, and when her father, and again, where do they get this from? You're asking this. And again, the rabbis, yes, they're very imaginative, but they often base their imaginatives on something that's in the text. And we have here, when her father and mother are dead, Mordecai took her for his own daughter. A Tana, a rabbinic scholar, taught in another text in the name of Rabbi Meir. Do not read the verse for a daughter, but rather read it as bayit. Instead of bat, read it as bayit. This indicates that Mordecai took Esther to be his wife. And so it states, they're just pointing out that so too Mordecai took her for a home, i.e., a wife. In other words, if they're taking the linguistic similarity between bat, daughter, and bayit, house, to make it sound as if not only did Mordecai take her for a bat, but she was part of his bayit, i.e., his house, i.e., his wife.
That makes him not a very nice man. Not taking her as his wife, but then to giving her off to someone else.
Well, first of all, is there an age difference between the two of these people?
Well,
Yeah, it accomplishes several things. Well, what does it accomplish? What have we accomplished by making Esther Mordecai's wife?
Makes him despicable.
yes.
Well, in our eyes, we're saying, hey, guy, this is your niece whose parents are dead. This doesn't look good, right? In our eyes. On the other hand, why do you think the rabbis are trying to say?
Legitimize the relationship that he has a young girl living in his house.
Okay, let's not think he was fooling around with her. They were married, right? And it also might say this explains the closeness that they felt for each other and why it was that we see in the rest of the story the tremendous, right? The tremendous concern that they have and the relationship they have with each other. It was because they were husband and wife. In other words, well, we may see it negatively, right?
Yeah.
The rabbis are trying to add something on a positive nature. But as we say, times have changed. Okay, we're just about out of time. Any other comments about this part so far?
And that he's sacrificing his wife for the good of the people.
Okay, I have a call coming in, so I'm gonna have to end this. Hold on 1 second. Hello? Yes, can you wait 1 minute, please? Okay. All right, I have a call
Okay.
from one of my
Thank you,
doctors.
Rabbi.
Thank
So,
you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay,
Bye.
we'll take a look at some other ways of reading the story when we meet next week. Okay.
Thank
Take
you.
care. We'll see you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.